if you've been alone for a long time, I think that's when we really realize, right? I think as INTPs, because we like being alone and we're always convinced there's endless possibility. And it's hard to find a meaning, because when everything's important, nothing's important. But then when you have a connection, the connection tethers you, and I think that's what's missing. We're missing that connection. We're missing this grounding by somebody, and I think that's really, then life becomes so much more meaningful. And same as well. Material possessions, they don't mean anything to me. As soon as I'd have money, I'd give it to people if I could. I think, or spend it on people, because it's the connections that mean things. That's how life. I also think we realize that we learn a lot more through connections with people than we do just sitting on our own in our rooms. When you're around people, you take in things that you wouldn't have even thought to research, and you things become so much more interesting. A song a friend showed you, or a film that you watched with somebody, experiences that you've had with other people. Everything is so much better with people. And I think that's one of the hard things that we come to learn, is that we really need people for not even for life to take a direction, but just to feel like real people, and to be the highest version of ourselves, to take as much in as possible. And also it helps the mind. Sometimes, after being around people, I can't wait to come back alone and go back into my research things, and it feels so much more fulfilling. So I think, yeah, I agree. I think as well, duty is extremely important, and I think that's something as INTPs are good at, and I think it's something that also destroys us when we have a duty towards people that isn't necessarily asked for, and then you can see some INTPs really, this becomes a problem. I've seen this. I think maybe my first relationship was slightly like that, not so much, but I can see. But I also think, this duty towards others is, it's really good for us. It's the only thing really worth it. It's what I like about Charles Dickens, actually. I think Charles Dickens, as a writer, kind of articulates this really well, and sort of a large part of my worldview is everything's about immediate involvement with others. There's no charity, no policy in place, really. It's just about direct personal responsibility for yourself and those in your immediate environment, and the accepting of all possibilities of character, and the welcoming of these people into your life, and your duty towards them as individuals, your acceptance of the strangeness and the directness of the interaction, this sort of Christian conservatism, which I think is so important. Because it's all about the direct one-on-one relationship with the individual, the personal. That's what's meaningful, and that's where the real change and the meaningful help towards people's life takes place, is one-on-one. And I think we as INTPs are really good at that, and we really appreciate that in others. But that's just that's something that kind of a stray thought that I have. That's interesting, because I think creating a future to buy a home, that's also one of my motivations, is to have a home so that I can put people in it and have this warmth to share with them, and it makes me, like, I only feel like I want to be a strong person when I'm helping others, and I think everything else just falls away otherwise. And I think that's something I've seen in a C.S. Joseph video. A friend, when I first got into the Myers-Briggs test, it was for a friend who was really into it, and he sent me C.S. Joseph's videos on the INTPs, and they're really good. They're actually really helpful for understanding ourselves. I really like C.S. Joseph. He's has this good sort of dynamic energy to him, which is motivational and vindicating. As an INTP, it makes you feel like you can do something. and that we're understood, and that we're not so terrible, and shows us how to use our strengths. So yeah, he's really good. Vladov Putler says, I suspect I may be an INTP. I don't think it's cold. I think some of it's a kind of paralysis. It's a kind of like we don't feel that we're entitled to react to the things we're saying. We feel like we're best serving other people, that we're best doing things. We're at our best when we're not putting emotions behind it, because then somebody else, when you ever have somebody who's anticipating an emotional reaction from you when something happens, and that you see this shock and this horror, this tension on their face, like they're anticipating it, and because then it's like, okay, which response do I select that's appropriate to respond to you? And then you just don't give them the emotional reaction, and then they realize that you didn't. There's no reaction, and it just carries on, and you kind of avoid an awkward moment because you feel bad for them having to respond to the emotions behind it, because it seems so artificial. So I think there's that. We feel like we're doing our best by not forcing responses from people. We're being good people because we're not showing our emotions, and we're so open and so easygoing, easy to talk to. So I think not having emotions behind what we say is some of it's in I think it begins like that, and then it becomes a habit. I don't think it's cold. I think it's actually really sensitive. I don't think it's a lack of empathy. I think most empathy now is, we're all doing performative empathy because we're so desperate to feel. I think it's. Or we don't have anybody to receive this empathy. Like, we all have this high capacity for it, and then it gets used on like TV shows and or books or something. It doesn't. There's no real use of it because we don't have really any responsibility or duty towards anybody. No one really cares. Or they do care, but it's like we haven't put in the infrastructure to have this kind of lifestyle. So it's all a bit erratic. I also do really well and try not to laugh challenges. I also can't be tickled. People try tickling me and it just doesn't work. I seem to have like switched off that kind of response as well. The thing with thoughts being images or abstract akin to a feeling, so I tend to feel like my mind is like a mirror surface, and then the sky, like a changing sky, is passing over it, and the clouds and the sun, and it's reflecting off this surface, and it changes, and it's like my mind is just this flat, shiny thing, taking in the world. That's how I tend to visualize it. It's like my mind's mirror eye or something, and it's just things pass over it. So much is flowing over it constantly. And I don't know if that's introverted thinking, because I remember a ENTP that I spoke to also had this, but yeah, I don't know. Same. I don't see the purpose of sharing thoughts with people. Sometimes, I think it's because I've thought through enough myself. I just don't see the relevance of it. And I don't see how it would be useful, although it actually tends to make people's lives more fulfilling if you learn how to do it in a way that's not too intrusive for them, because nobody likes being pulled into somebody else's dream world. I guess, I'm an abstract thinker and a daydreamer, and I tend to spend a lot of time there, but I know that if I were to communicate that to others, unless it was in something that they were equally excited about, because I feel like, so I remember in some sort of meetup event, there was a guy who had spent his life daydreaming, and he would just talk about, I've daydreamed my life, and I had all these thoughts in my mind, and kind of disgusted me. It was like it's like somebody giving off a bad smell. It's like being sucked into somebody's unwashed, sort of dark, dank masturbation chamber. And I think maybe that's why we tend to keep things in our head, because we don't know how to share in an ingratiated way with others. It's just this kind of like pool of like self-reflection, and it just pulls people in, and it's just a bit putrid. But I don't know. These are just my thoughts. I'm not saying this is the case for you, or this is the case generally, or this is something. Yeah, I guess the thing is that we never really know who we are or what we want. We just have to keep doing things, and then things create as a sort of like a shell over the top, which can be beautiful and varied and interesting. And there's no, it's not really like a kernel of the truth that we're looking for. It's not the real heart of things. We're never going to find that, but we're going to have more dynamics and more meaningful, loving lives if we just keep each day, just keep walking and walking. It's like keep putting the steps down, keep putting your feet down, and they'll cover the ground. And then the ground is like, things will be built and created as you just do them. You just need to do it, and it unravels of its own accord. And then the heart is found through the action. It's not, you won't find it by thinking about it. That's something I've recently realized, and I wish I'd realized it a lot sooner. But we really have to act rather than think about the meaning or authenticity, because there is ultimately none. I think we're less stylized than other people, but just because of how we've learnt to present things. But I think, or how we haven't learnt, which is equally part of the problem. But I think we do have to keep going. But I don't think it's hard to find that balance with like harmony with others and your own goals, but you can't build from top down. It has to come from bottom up, and I think there needs to be some sort of, I guess, middle ground, which was why I became interested in conservatism back in, it was 2016, of course, when everything was. And bear in mind, I'm in the UK, so for us that's Brexit, but we were also paying attention to America, and everything was crazy politically. But I was interested in conservatism as it's like a negotiation between self and others, and the thing with others, it's not just going along with them, but it's your duties towards them that you owe society to uphold yourself strong so you can uphold others, and so that you can be healthy in some sense and have some, that your position towards the world is not one of just following, but it's one of duty and responsibility. And then your position to yourself is one of perfectibility, and we have SI, right? So tradition, and following. Tradition is education. We're taking in the world, all that's been, all that's to come. We're creative, and I think so. Conservatism was really interesting for me, and I know it's cringe and overplayed, but Edmund Burke, Peter Hitchens, and things like that. I was reading those. I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing about politics, and I'm not especially involved in anything. But I think that became really interesting to me, just as a way of negotiating this introversion with authenticity, because I think conservatism is also authenticity. This is the way that works. This is the way that as people we function in society. But European conservatism, old conservatism, 18th century, 19th century ideas of conservatism, these were really important to me.